You're at the International Desk. Hello, everyone. I'm HALA GORANI. We're live in Abu Dhabi this evening. Let's get you straight to our top stories. France puts together a possible ultimatum for Syria. Give up your chemical weapons or else. But can it be done? Can it be enforced? And could this just be a strategy for Damascus to avoid a military strike? Plus, the American President, Barack Obama, faces a very reluctant nation just hours from now. His plan on Syria has been a tough sell so far. So is America worldwide starting to look indecisive and guilty on charges of gang rape and murder? 4 men are convicted in the case that sent shockwaves across India. The punishments they could face and why there's a possibility they could still walk free. Hello and welcome, everyone. The very latest developments in the Syria crisis. And we begin with the simultaneous push for strikes and for a diplomatic solution in response to Syria's alleged chemical attack last month. Syria says it's signing on to a plan from Russia to put its chemical stockpiles under international control. That came yesterday, of course. Syria's foreign minister says the plan would, quote, remove grounds for American aggression, unquote. This today is playing out in the United Nations, where France is trying to push a somewhat tougher proposal, and Moscow is pushing back. And as talks go on to defuse the crisis, U.S. President Barack Obama is preparing to address the American people 8 hours from now. He's expected to still make the case for military action. France is taking the lead at the Security Council. It's laying out a number of tough provisions for Syria to avoid strikes, but can the text get through the UN Security Council? That's always the question. Nick Payne-Walsh is at the UN, but first CNN's Jim Bitterman joins us now with details from our Paris bureau. What is the French proposal to the UN Security Council, Jim?
Well, I can tell you what the starting point of the French proposal is, and we don't know how it's going to end up when it finally goes before the Security Council, but Laurent Fabius, the foreign minister here, said this morning that basically the French have got 5 points they want included in any kind of Security Council resolution. Those 5 points are a condemnation of the killings on August 21st, a requirement that the regime, the Assad regime, put aside its chemical weapons and put them under the control of international inspectors, and the idea would be to eventually dismantle them, that there would be some kind of an inspection routine set up for by the Assad regime to make sure that the chemical weapons are not being brought back, and that there would be a provision for serious consequences if the provisions of this Security Council resolution were not respected, and finally, that the perpetrators of the 21st of August events would be prosecuted in an international court of justice. Now, that's sort of the French pushing the envelope as far as it'll go after sort of the vague sort of things we were hearing yesterday from the Russian foreign minister and the Syrian foreign minister. This is a proposal that they'll put on the table, but long before it gets to the table, there may be some negotiating going on in New York between the Russians and the French about what should exactly be there. Here's what Laurent Fabius said this morning as he presented these. It was his way of saying how they would evaluate how serious the Russians and Syrians are.
We welcome this new position with interest, but with precaution. We don't want it to be used as a maneuver for diversion. We discussed it with the French president, and we decided to take the initiative. France will file a resolution before the United Nations Security Council in this sense, and the procedure will start today.
So it's a tough but thoughtful line, as Laurent Fabius said. Hala?
Okay, Jim Bitterman, thanks very much. Let's go to the United Nations. Nick Payne-Walsh is standing by with more on what to expect from the UN Security Council, because as always, Nick, we have 2 members, permanent members, Russia and China, who are most likely to oppose any tough language in a French proposal.
Absolutely, and if you look at the French proposal, there's a lot in there which will clearly be unpalatable to the Russians. And I think we heard from one UN diplomat here saying that there have in fact been bilateral meetings between the French and other members of the Security Council during the day. That's clearly trying to perhaps find middle ground. We've had indications from AFP that the French believe the Russians are unhappy with certain parts of this, but just in the last few minutes we have learned that at 4 o'clock today there will be consultations in the UN Security Council. That's a closed closed-door meeting called by the current rotating president of the UN Security Council, which is Australia right now, to discuss Syria. So we do know that the sides are pretty far apart in what they would like to be in this draft, but perhaps the fact we're seeing consultations being called at this stage suggests that there's enough common ground for the talks to be continuing, or maybe this is a way of trying to hammer out more openly exactly what could be in that text. But really difficult, I think, for Russia to swallow the initial French text, which openly condemns the Syrian regime for the attacks, calls for serious consequences if weapons aren't handed over, and also said there should be some sort of prosecution for the perpetrators of the attacks of 21st of August, HALA.
So is perhaps the best that the UN, or I should say France, the UK, and the US, the best that they could hope for at the Security Council is a resolution that would remove the threat of force if demands aren't met from the Syrian government?
It's going to be hard, I think, HALA, to put through any language that the Russians would accept that implicitly suggests the threat of force afterwards. You remember the whole issue with Iraq and how the Security Council had to remain apprised of the issue if the demands weren't necessarily meant of weapons inspectors. So that's certainly going to be a sticking point here. But the Russians are in a bind too, because they've already said international control should be put over Syria's chemical weapons program. They're probably going to have to get behind something. It's just going to be the time it takes and how watered down that language is that really dictates all, HALA.
All right, and of course, we can go out on a limb and say that this is all approved. The practicalities, the logistics of identifying, of locating, of moving, of then destroying chemical weapons. I mean, this is not a very difficult and complicated mission here.
Extraordinarily so. And I mean, in fact, I spoke to a spokesperson for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, who would be doing much of this work if a mission were to go ahead. And I think they would be looking for the UN to advise them on security. It's a complex task, certainly. They're talking about how their mission itself wouldn't be a fishing expedition. Syria would have to put forward its arsenal, what it says it has and where those things are, and then the OPCW would go in, get them, remove it, and subsequently destroy it if that was given to them as their particular mandate. But a phenomenally difficult task. You don't have to be an expert in this field to know that Syria's civil war is so brutal at this point. The mere idea of sending in a comprehensive and safe mission to get these weapons, move them, store them, and then destroy them, a very time-consuming and dangerous task, could actually be done when there are missiles and shells flying around at the rate they are right now, HALA.
Indeed. Nick Payne-Walsh at the United Nations in New York. Well, as we've been reporting, Syria has agreed to put its chemical weapons under international control, but the Syrian opposition says President Assad is just trying to buy time and that he'll drag out the diplomatic process as long as possible and stall. Let's bring in senior international correspondent Arwa Damon from CNN Beirut. So we've heard from other senior Syrian officials today after the foreign minister in Moscow today responding to this Russian proposal, Arwa.
Yeah, and all of them effectively saying that they do, in fact, welcome this development, that they are willing to comply with that Russian proposal. We don't know the specifics of it just yet. And this is a move, as you just mentioned there, that has absolutely infuriated the opposition and also made them completely and utterly dismayed. They were, to a certain degree, anticipating that this possible U.S. strike, although it wasn't going to significantly alter the battlefield, was at least going to provide them with a little bit of momentum to make some gains, was at the very least going to send a serious message to the regime not to undertake this kind of an attack. And once again, they are feeling as if the international community has completely abandoned them, because now this is going to be a very lengthy, dragged-out process, HALA.
All right, and I was going to agree with you on that. We spoke to Louis Al-Mugdad, who's the spokesperson for the Free Syrian Army, saying he still hopes that Barack Obama will order a strike, although you could tell that he was disappointed, especially when it comes to arms shipments. The Free Syrian Army is still saying they are not receiving promised help, money and arms that they were hoping to get from countries that support them.
Yeah, and that's been one of the key problems here, is that despite all of these promises by the U.S., by various other Western nations, that they were going to be arming select groups within the Free Syrian Army that they deem to be friendly, those arms shipments really haven't materialized in any true significant way whatsoever. In fact, if you go on YouTube, you'll see some of these activists with a sense of humor putting up these videos where they're showing turtles that they've disguised to look as tanks, saying, look, this is all that we've gotten so far. The reason why it's so critical that they be armed to a certain degree, when we look at the dynamics of the Syrian battlefield, is that there has been a flow of weaponry and funding to the more extremist elements on the battlefield, those that are linked to al-Qaeda, which gives them then amongst the ranks of the rebel fighting force, it gives these al-Qaeda-linked elements something of an upper hand, Hala.
All right, Arwa Damon, thanks very much for that report from Beirut. Well, we may have an answer as far as Russia's reaction to that French proposal at the UN Security Council that we're expecting to emerge very quickly. Russia calling France's proposal, quote, unacceptable. So it seems as though whatever diplomatic effort there is being made at the United Nations by France has already been met with the opposition of Moscow, which was not unexpected. The new flurry of international diplomacy is putting even more importance on what the American president might say in his televised address tonight. Barack Obama talked about the Russian proposal for Syria to hand over its chemical weapons in a round of interviews on Monday. A reminder of what he had to say.
It is a potentially positive development. I have to say that it's unlikely that we would have arrived at that point where there were even public statements like that without a credible military threat to deal with the chemical weapons use inside of Syria. And so it's possible that we can get a breakthrough, but it's going to have to be followed up on, and we don't want just a stalling or delaying tactic to put off the pressure that we have on there right now.
President Obama's interview there with CNN. Well, CNN will, of course, have live coverage of the president's national address on Syria. It happens Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern in the United States. That's early Wednesday at 2 in the morning in London, 3 in Berlin, right here on CNN. We're going to be talking a lot more about what this means for the Obama presidency and what the perception is of the administration following these days of discussions and threats as well against Syria by the Obama administration, as well as some of this diplomatic effort that's being put into trying to resolve the situation without the use of force. All that later in the program, so do stay tuned for that as we show you live images of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. After a break, the U.S. Congress grapples with an unexpected alternative for Syria. How much is that Russian proposal affecting discussions in that building on Capitol Hill? Plus, an especially brutal act sparked angry protests across India last December. Now a verdict has been reached in the gang rape and killing of a woman on a bus in New Delhi. And holding the